out, or if you want to share it with your teams later. Just pressing admit. Sorry, Kate, you started record. Oh, yep, beautiful. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Kathy Kirby. I'm a registered nurse and I'm one of the directors at Thrive Aged Care Consultants. Like I said, we've got Kate up there giving a wave, who is manning the chat, etc. today. But welcome to today's session where we're going to talk about behaviour support plans. I'm very passionate about this. I don't know whether anyone saw my little rant video, but it's something that I have got a big passion about. So I really wanted to run this session today to share some ideas with you about what we could do a little bit differently and potentially a little bit better. So after today's session, and it is a very quick half-hour session, so we're just touching on a few points, but we're going to talk about what you actually need for a behaviour support plan, what is required to be included in it, and we're going to touch on the why. So we're very big on the why at Thrive. So why do we need to be more specific in our behaviour support plans? Why do we need to be specific with what information we're putting in there? We're going to talk about how we're going to link our knowledge about what we know about a person's history and their triggers and some strategies into that plan so that we can create a user-friendly behaviour support plan. So that when we have a look at the end, we see what we might see currently, and we're going to have a look at what we would like to see in the future. So let's start at the beginning and a quick refresher on who needs a behaviour support plan and why. And I know that majority of you guys attending are working in aged care. So there are regulatory requirements in aged care in relation to behaviour support plans. But behaviour support plans can be used more generally for people who display responsive or changed or challenging or behaviours of concern, whatever term you are used to using. It is a document that should be used for your high-risk consumers or your high-risk clients or residents, depending on the area that you work in. In aged care, if that's the setting that we're talking about today, any consumer who displays those challenging behaviours and any consumer who is receiving a restrictive practice. So when we're talking about restrictive practices, we're talking about a person who's receiving chemical restraint, mechanical restraint, environmental restraint, seclusion, or physical restraint. Okay. And this is a legislative requirement. So like we were talking about in aged care from July 2021, it was required that any resident who is receiving a restrictive practice or you're considering using a restrictive practice for must have a behaviour support plan in place. And the purpose behind that is to document the alternatives that you have tried before you're putting that restrictive practice into use, okay? So the idea is not saying you cannot use a restrictive practice ever. The idea is saying before you put that in place and before you're restricting a person's ability to go outside, to move around, to walk unassisted, or we're, giving them a PI medication, we need to make sure that we've tried all the other alternatives before we get to that point. And that's what we're going to talk about with our behaviour support plan. Of course, if we're using a restrictive practice, then we need to have informed consent. And it's like we were saying, it should only be used as a last resort, not saying that you cannot use it. Okay, so that's a myth that the Commission were talking about this week. It's just saying that we have assessed and tried and tested other alternatives first. Okay. So this is again is just the legislative requirements we've covered off, and it is under the quality of care principles. So it is a requirement that we need to complete. However, it's not intended to be a ticker box exercise. And sometimes I know, in particular in aged care, there's been so much change, so many new regulations come in that we can be overwhelmed with the things that we need to do, and we tend to do things because we need to, and it becomes that ticker box exercise. And we want to go back to, like I was saying at the start, why? Why are we needing a behaviour support plan in the first place? What is it in? What are we going to use it for? Okay. So why do we need them? Okay, so I want you to imagine, and if any of you do, some extra work in all of your spare time and do some agency shifts, Imagine that you're in that agency shift role, or I'll use my experience, where I was working as a nurse advisor in the big COVID outbreaks, okay? I got called in to go into a facility that had 65 residents. I was the only nurse with one other person, never set foot in the place before in my life, walked in on a Saturday night shift. Here you go, look after all of these residents with 2 staff. Now, have we got time, if we're in that situation, to go and sit down, log onto a computer and read everybody's 42-page care plan? No, we don't. Okay, so the purpose behind having a plan that is concise and contains information that is relevant and important for a person to know is that I can just go in, I'm aware that a person has complex behaviours or they have a restrictive practice, and I can have a look and say, this is the information that I need to know to make my shift run better. And this is the information that I need to know that is going to support me to support this particular resident. Okay, so thinking about where you work at the moment, I'm sure that you've all got at least one resident or one patient or one client who is complex and has very specific needs. And I can see a few people nodding. So think about all of that information that you have in your head and think about how you would share that with somebody who's never set foot in the place before. What are the key things that you need to share with somebody who is new so that they know what approach to take or what approach not to take with that particular resident, let's say. So when we're looking at a behaviour support plan, what should it include or what does it need to include? It needs to describe the person and their history, okay? So we're all individuals. We've all got different life history. We've all got different things that are going to annoy us. We've got different things that calm us down. Me in particular, I like going for a walk each day and I like a good coffee in the morning. 2 of those things that if I don't get, I can get a little bit, you know, a little bit niggly. Something that you don't want to ask me to do is gardening, because that'll really agitate me. And I can see Pam laughing. So, you know, that's not something that's sometimes it's an approach that we take, a generalised approach to people when we're trying to distract them or we're trying to redirect them. Let's go out to the garden. If you said that to me, it'd agitate me even more. So it's really important to understand the person and, you know, what they like, what their background is, you know, are there key parts of information that we need to be aware of. We need to know what their care needs are. So what are they able to do? So let's not focus on what they can't do. Let's focus on what they can do. And we need to identify the person's triggers. And we're going to get into that more so in a minute. And we're also going to talk about individualised intervention strategies. So again, like I just used with that garden example, taking me and redirecting me out to the garden is not a strategy that you want to try. That's something that you would want to list down as do not offer, okay? Because it's not going to have the effect that you're hoping for. We want to document what works well as what doesn't work well, okay? So, you know, for me, offer me a nice strong coffee and you'll probably win me over. Offer to take me out to the garden, we're going down the wrong track here. Okay, and the goal of this behaviour support plan, again, is to list, I want you to try all of these things before we get to the use of a PRN medication or, you know, using a mechanical restraint. Okay, so we're going to list all of these items first and then say, if all else fails, after you've tried all of these, then you can offer or try to use a PRN risperidone, let's say. Okay. So the ultimate goal is to help you support that person so that they have the optimal health and well-being, okay? We're going to move into a case study. We're going to talk about Gwen, and Gwen is a real person. So the thing with, you know, Kate and I, we've been around a lot. I go to a lot of different facilities, so I've got lots of different case studies, and Gwen was a really good one, okay? Now, when we went to this particular facility, they said to me, oh, Gwen is really challenging. She goes from 0 to 100 with her behaviours. She goes from nothing to throwing items at staff. She actually threw a wheelie frame through the nurse's station. Absolutely, there's no triggers. She needs to go. yep, she needs to go to another facility. We can't care for her. She needs specialist support. So we went in and we went, oh, okay, let's have a think about this and let's go back to the start, okay? Now, let's go back and we'll talk to the staff. And what did we find out? Well, Gwen's lived in the facility for 2 years, okay? And her relevant medical history at this point is that she has frontotemporal dementia. She's also got an intellectual disability and she's got osteoarthritis, okay? This is, again, the relevant medical history. I don't really need to know that she had a hernia repair in 1952 because it's not relevant at this point, okay? These are the 3 medical components that I want to know about. What else do we know about Gwen? She was a foster child, okay, and she went through many different homes. So, you know, she was growing up quite fast, even with her intellectual disability. You know, she had to mature quite quickly. She never married and she lived with her her last foster mum until she went into care, so even after the age of 18. Gwen is very routine driven, okay? If you're 5 minutes late with her tablets and her care, she'll become verbally and physically aggressive. She often paces the corridor near the nurse's station, and like I was saying, she can throw items at people as well, including her wheelie frame. She particularly loves rock and roll music, and she's currently living in your memory support unit, okay? Now, what do we know about Gwen here is because she's in the memory support unit, she's not able to use the keypad code. She can't remember the code to put in, so she's considered to be environmentally restrained as well, okay, because she needs assistance from staff to be able to leave that unit. So I went and had a look at her behaviour support plan, and this is what was written, okay? So Gwen has these behaviours. She's verbally aggressive towards staff and residents. She's physically aggressive towards staff and residents, and she is wandering and intrusive, okay? And it did reflect that she's environmentally restrained. When we have a look at this though, does it tell us much information? If you were coming in as an agency nurse and you've never met Gwen before and she's got this lovely lady right here, does it tell you enough information? What does verbally aggressive mean? Because verbally aggressive to me would be somebody swearing at me or speaking in an aggressive tone and using body language, whereas for somebody else, verbally aggressive might be somebody talking with a loud tone of voice, maybe because they're a bit deaf, so they naturally speak louder. So if we're not specific with our information, then our interpretation can vary as well. The same with the physical aggression. Physical aggression doing what? Okay, is Gwen hitting people? Is she throwing items? Is she pushing people as she walks past? You know, there's not enough detail in here. And the wandering and intrusive behaviour is another example. Wandering where? What does wandering mean? Because sometimes I see people labelled as being wanderers who are simply walking around their house because the residential facility is their home. And because they're walking around and they're not seated attending activities or watching TV or engaged in something, then we label them as wandering but when actual fact, maybe they quite enjoyed walking before they came in and they were just walking around because it's a part of their old routine. So again, not enough specific information here, okay? Intrusive is another behaviour that is often described. Intrusive meaning what, you know? Is Gwen going into a person's room, into the doorway and peering in and then continuing to walk? Or is she being intrusive and actually entering the room and rifling through other residents' items? Very different scenarios there, okay? So this is commonly what we see when we're looking at a behaviour support plan. And I know if you work in aged care, oftentimes you have online systems. So we've got, and they're all different, you know, we've got Manna, we've got iCare, we've got Autumn Care, we've got eCase. They're all very different systems, but a lot of them, unfortunately, have got care plans that have drop-down boxes that want us to pick, you know, to pick one option, okay? So sometimes they can be limiting. However, there are free text boxes in there and we don't always make the best use out of them. So commonly what I see in behaviour support plans is this, okay? So Gwen has got wandering and intrusive behaviours. What are her triggers? Well, what have we got listed here? Basically her diagnosis, yep. And we've got, you know, pain in there. Well, beautiful. That's one thing that we've identified. But when we look at her strategies, speak slowly and clearly, give her time to respond, redirect Gwen to activities of her choice, reorientate her to time and place. Does this look familiar or sound familiar to anyone? I'm seeing a few nods as well. Sometimes we tend to pick the generic strategies because we aren't quite sure what the specific strategies might be. And there aren't always going to be specific triggers or specific strategies for every behaviour. But oftentimes we're not identifying them because we haven't evaluated the data that we've collected, okay? So if we have a look at Gwen's second behaviour, which is the physical aggression, we have a look again, same triggers, look again, same strategies, yeah? So we haven't quite identified the specifics for Gwen. And things like speaking slowly and clearly and giving Gwen time to respond, you know, I'm not saying don't include them in your behaviour support plan, but is that something that we should be doing generally with everybody? Yeah. So do we need to put things in for the sake of putting them in? Probably not. Let's save that space because if it's, you know, limited text that you can put in there, let's save it to put in the really specific information that I want to know about Gwen. So let's have a review, okay? So we've got Gwen's behaviour support plan. What does it tell us? Not too much really, does it? Is the information useful? Not really either. Like I've never met Gwen before. It doesn't tell me to do anything different to what I should be doing with everybody. Yeah. Does it guide our care? No. Do we understand Gwen as a person? No. And what assessments and information have we used when we were creating this behaviour support plan? I actually don't know because it doesn't refer to anything. Yeah. So let's move on. So when we're creating our behaviour support plan, it's not something that we're just making up or guessing, yeah, because at some point we have that knowledge that we have gathered. So we collect a lot of data and information, but oftentimes the step that we miss is the evaluation. And again, we collect a lot of information and sometimes it turns into a little bit of a ticker box exercise because we need to do our ROD, we need to do our reassessments, and we might, someone's had a fall, so we have to do these particular charting, or someone's had a behaviour incident, so we have to do these charts. But then what do we do with the information? We don't always take that next step and sit down and look at it and try to evaluate and find, let's break down all of that useful data that we've collected. And we collect lots of information. We get feedback from people like our carers or our kitchen staff or cleaning staff. We do pain charting, we do behaviour charting, we do continence charting, we monitor people's bowels 3 times a day to make sure they're pooping. Like there's all of this information. And sometimes we fill it in accurately, sometimes we fill it in retrospectively, but oftentimes we don't pull all of that information together. So what we did with Gwen when we went into this facility is we said, let's start again. So we're going to do pain charting, behaviour charting, continence charting, and we're going to look at her bowel charts. And we did that for 7 days, and then we sat down, we did it hourly, and then we sat down as a group with our RNs, the carers, a family member, and we put all the information together. We got a highlighter, and we tried to work out patterns, okay? And when we pulled all of that information together, we found a few things out. Okay, so what we did, take a second. So what were we looking for? We were looking for patterns. Okay, we were looking for patterns for the times or the days of the behaviour. Now, remembering that when I started there, Gwen went from 0 to 100. There was no triggers. There were, nothing worked. She just went from 0 to 100 to throwing a frame at people, and she needed to leave the facility because it wasn't safe. Okay. So what are we doing? We're sitting there, we're highlighting, we're looking for patterns of days or times or people that might trigger Gwen, okay? And then we're looking from there, we work out what works well for Gwen, what doesn't work well. What circumstance are we potentially going to use that PRN medication that we have for Gwen? And we also are going to write down, if we are using that restrictive practice, what monitoring do we need to do for Gwen? So if we get to the point where Gwen needs a PRN risperidone, let's say, how am I going to monitor that? Because that needs to be included in your behaviour support plan. Yeah, so am I going to monitor her every half an hour to make sure that she's more settled, that she's not over-sedated, that she's not hungry or thirsty, etc. Okay, and we're going to pull all of that information together to create her behaviour support plan. So this is what we started to look at when we were pulling together her behaviour support plan. So we had some details about Gwen, and remembering we want to think worst case scenario. We're thinking an agency nurse coming in on a night shift by herself. What does she need to know that's important about Gwen? Well, we need to know Gwen lived in foster care for most of her life, and she lived in over 15 homes. Okay, so she's moved around a lot. She could be quite unsettled. Her most settled time was living with her last foster mum before she came into the facility. She's got a daily routine which she's never deviated from. Key thing to note, okay? Trigger there, isn't there? Because if you deviate from her, if she's used to having a daily routine, then that's probably going to be a trigger, isn't it? When something out of the ordinary happens that means the usual routine isn't followed, Gwen would become verbally aggressive, swearing and shouting. Okay, so there's a trigger that's quite specific right there, a trigger for a specific behaviour. She can then escalate to becoming physically aggressive and throwing items at anyone near her. Ah, okay, so now we're getting a little bit more information about Gwen. And she's never socialised outside of her house, so she's not used to being in large groups, and she finds noise irritating. So just in that information about Gwen and her history, you can identify 3 triggers, can't you? Noise, large groups of people, and being out of her daily routine. Okay, so 3 things that we can automatically avoid triggering Gwen with by putting some strategies in place and educating our team. Then we're including her relevant history. So again, she has frontotemporal dementia, so we're not going to go into that, but thinking about the common symptoms that come with frontotemporal dementia. And she also has severe osteoarthritis, causing pain. There's another trigger for you, pain, okay, and particularly in her left hip. Something else that we need to know, Gwen doesn't respond to questions of, are you in pain? So if you ask her, are you in pain? She doesn't respond to you. So another key bit of information there that I need to know so that I don't go up to Gwen and say, are you in pain? Because I'm not going to get an answer. And when Gwen is pacing near the nurse's station, oftentimes it indicates that she has pain in her hip. Now, where did we get that information from? From comparing her pain charting with her behaviour charting, and speaking to staff, because we're pulling all of that rich data together to identify what the trigger might be. Gwen can also forget where the public toilets are, and she'll on occasion walk into other residents' room in corridor C, so quite specific, looking for the toilet. So what are we talking about here? This is her intrusive behaviour or her wandering. So her wandering is actually been identified as Gwen trying to find the toilet. And again, how did we identify this? Because we were using her continence chart and her behaviour chart, and we were talking to staff as well. So let's have a look about just one component of her behaviour support plan now and look at how we're going to write it differently. So here we've got Gwen's triggers, and we've got Gwen can wander, and we're going to talk about her wandering and intrusive behaviour. So Gwen can wander and become intrusive into residents' rooms. This usually occurs in corridor C near the lounge room and mostly in afternoons. So again, remembering we're pulling all that information together and we're trying to look for patterns of times and days. Gwen can pace near the nurse's station, and this normally occurs in the afternoon or if she's been sitting for long periods of time. This is usually triggered by her trying to find a toilet, having pain in her hip, and then it's also referencing that she's environmentally restrained and that she needs assistance from staff, if she needs to leave the area, okay? But it also says that Gwen doesn't usually exit seek. So even though she's wandering around, the reason that she's generally wandering or pacing is because of her pain and because of trying to find the toilet. So very specific there. And you can see it's quite specific about the location and the time of day. So if I'm an agency nurse, I pick that up and I see, okay, Gwen's really she's quite intrusive and she's distressing others. Okay, it's normally related to this. So I'll try this approach. Okay, so it's more specific. You cannot always find a specific trigger and a specific strategy, but we can certainly find more information when we look at it than what we generally see when we're writing down, general behaviours and general triggers. Yeah. When we look at the strategies that minimise or prevent Gwen's wandering and intrusive behaviours are that prompting her to use the toilet as per her own continence schedule. Okay, so for us, I need to know that prompting Gwen to go to the toilet every 2 hours is really important to prevent her from wandering and being intrusive into other people's rooms and therefore triggering other people to become, being triggered by her behaviour. Strategies like having a picture of the toilet and the word toilet printed on the wall. If Gwen starts pacing near the nurse's station, it indicates that she has pain. Ask her if it's sore. Don't ask her if she has pain because this agitates her. Again, it's being very specific. And this was, again, a true scenario for this lady. So what the staff had initially told us was that she went from 0 to 100 and there was nothing in between. What we actually identified when we pulled all this information together was when Gwen was pacing, what would happen was she would start pacing up and down in front of the nurse's station in this particular corridor. It was only in that corridor. Then after she'd paced for about 5 minutes, if it wasn't picked up, she would start yelling and swearing at staff. So she'd become verbally aggressive. And then very quickly, she would go from verbal aggression to physical aggression because her communication was not getting received by the staff. She's trying to tell us through her behaviour that she has pain in that hip. Now, the strategy for Gwen, and again, this is a true story, was that we needed to walk, as soon as she started pacing and showing that behaviour near the nurse's station, we needed to walk with her and give her an oxynorm in jam while we were walking with her, okay? And then she would calm down quite quickly. Yep, so she didn't escalate if you took that approach. If you were to offer her a heat pack, she'd probably throw it at you. And she was on regular Panadol, so there was no, that wasn't a step that we needed to go through. The best approach for her was to identify early on that this pacing behaviour is triggered by pain in her hip, and the best course of action, the best strategy for Gwen is to offer her that oxynorm while we're walking with her to prevent the further escalation of behaviour. Okay, so very specific information. So if we compare that together, and I've got 1 minute left, I'm going to fly through. Compare version 1 of what we see in the behaviour support plan. Yep. What's in there? Do we get much information out of that? No. Yep. Then we move on to version 2, which is what we just ran through. How much more user-friendly is this version to this version? Yep. When we get back to our why of why we have a behaviour support plan, it is to help us to support us and our team to support the resident or the client or the patient that we're looking after. So in order to do that, we need to be really specific or as specific as possible. And like I said at the start, we're not always going to identify as specific a detail as what we did with Gwen, but remembering back to, what the staff told us when we initially went in, which was she's gone from 0 to 100. There's no trigger, there's no strategy, nothing works, she needs to go, to actually pausing and saying, okay, why? Let's go back, get all of that information, evaluate, and pull all that information together. Before we wrap up, it's really important. There's no point us collecting data and then not evaluating it, and there's no point then evaluating it and not sharing it with others. Okay, so when we pull that behaviour support plan together, we need to communicate it. So we need to include our resident where possible. We need to include their decision maker. And in aged care, you know, they have everyone has a right to have access to their care plan. Okay, it's a part of standard 2. The treating team should be involved. We should, if you have somebody like Gwen who has a very specific behaviours that people need to be aware of, then reference it on your handover sheet. Because I haven't got time, if I'm an RN in charge and there's 65 residents, I haven't got time to be going and reading everyone's care plan, okay? So I want to know, who do I need to read and what do I need to know? And the care plan needs to get to the point because we're all busy. So don't put in information that isn't relevant and direct people to those behaviour support plans that really need to, you know, have that focus. So these are the people that you need to know about so that you can, you know, have a good shift. That person isn't going to become distressed and you're not going to spend your time trying to work out why they're agitated because all of the information's there for you. So 1 minute over, the 5 W's, why. It always comes back to why, okay? When we're developing the behaviour support plan, it's not a ticker box. We need to think about what is the purpose. The purpose is that it should be a user-friendly document that tells us what we need to know. We need to know about the person, their history, likes and dislikes, and we need to know who to share that information with. Be specific as possible. Physical aggression doesn't mean anything. It means something different to everybody in this room, okay? So be as specific as you can. Is it pushing? Is it throwing things? You know, is the verbal aggression swearing or is it having a loud voice? What assessments have you completed? Because I have to say when I go around, oftentimes they're not always completed very well. So sometimes we just need to start again. Yep. But again, not starting again to tick a box, starting again to get accurate information that is going to help us to care for that person. And how are you going to support the resident to minimise or prevent these behaviours from occurring, okay? And how effective are the strategies? Because that strategy for Gwen with the pain, amazing. Yep. When do the behaviours occur? Again, be specific, all right? Is it a certain day? Is it a certain week, a certain year? Another resident that I had was very triggered. Again, couldn't work out why. We looked at the information. It was Wednesday afternoons and it was when the music was on and they didn't like the loud noises and that was the trigger. So what do? We put a strategy in to make sure that they're in a different area of a facility so that they don't get triggered by the noise. Yeah, so don't wait until it happens. You know now that the concert is a trigger for that person, so make sure that they're not around that area at that time. I'll send you a copy of the slides. Somebody just asked in the chat. Yes, is there a particular location and, you know, communicating that plan to as many people as possible. Don't keep the information to yourself. Yep. Imagine that there's a stranger coming in, think COVID times, you know, how are they going to use this information? And now we're going to send you, I'm 4 minutes over, very sorry, but I'm very passionate, as you can see. We are going to send you a copy of this recording, a link actually, and we'll send you the slides. And we're also going to send you a very quick audit tool. We know how much nurses love audits, but this is intended, it's like 3 residents. I want you to pick 3 residents, 3 patients, 3 clients out, and very simple yes and no questions. Have a look at them, pull them all out together, even cross their names off, because sometimes you look at them and you realise, oh dear, they all look the same. Okay, so it's something just to get you thinking a little bit differently about, you know, how well your behaviour support plans are now and maybe how we can tweak them a little bit to be a bit more user friendly. And always use that lens of thinking agencies, Saturday night shift, COVID, nightmare. Okay, worst case scenario. Sorry, I've sped through. I'm over time, but I'm very happy if anybody wants to hang around, ask questions or put them in the chat. We do have some more education opportunities, particularly around dementia support in the, thanks Holly, over the next couple of weeks. So our next one in 3 weeks is on capacity and dignity of risk. It's not a free session, sorry guys, but yeah, there's lots of sessions that we're offering, so we'll send you through those as well. We'll also send you through a very quick, it'll take you 2 minutes and it's an anonymous survey. We'll send you the link and we would love your feedback. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump up or put them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, bye.
Kathy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Come for a tour.
I will. Thanks, Pam. I'll be in touch.